Alright everyone, this lecture video is going to be a little different. The majority of the lecture videos I've done for you all have been dealing actually with sort of the nuts and bolts of writing, but this one I want to get into a little bit more of this content we're talking about. If you should already be logged in, obviously, if you're watching the video, but if you go to our class site and access the prompt sheet, and review it, I ask you, should be pulling up any second now. Microsoft Word, since I updated it, has been a little slow. There it is. And reviewed it, I ask you to consider how images transform and begin to take on new meanings. Now, what I'm talking about here is how an image can go from something as simple as, let's say, two lines on a page, right? We think about this symbol. Can go from something as simple as two basic lines on a page to being, the central symbol of one of the world's largest religions. We have here, we type in the word cross and we go to images, it suddenly goes to meaning like this. And so what you get is this evolution of image, this evolution of symbol from object to symbol, and then eventually to something like an icon, where you can have, the cross itself becomes something much more. And so how do images do that? How do they make this transition, this odd transition from here to here to here? What is that process? It's an interesting question to pose and think about. And in fact, the essay by Thomas Hine on page 100 talks a little bit about that, why images become icons. And you do have a bit of that as well with The Perfect Icon for the Imperfect Post-Literate World by Reed Mercer Schuckart, I think is how that name is pronounced. And these two articles, and including also the third, Robin Landis Speaking Brand, really help, I think, to give you a good foundation for the sort of thinking I want you to have about this. And some of you have already picked some excellent ideas, like flags, for example. Flags are iconic images, and some would say we even, we worship the symbols more than we worship the ideals. That we pay more homage and we respect the symbols more than we respect the ideals that they're supposed to represent. So understanding how these objects become and transformed through associative meanings is really fascinating. So what you'll need to do is you'll need to select a single image and explore its evolution from object to symbol and possibly to icon. Some things have not become iconic yet, whereas other things do become iconic over time. I think of something like, well, let's look at this. Let's look at the bat symbol, for example. Actually, I think I already have this kind of laid out in another document for you all in my notes. Oh no, that's that model essay. Well, I thought I had it here, but apparently those notes weren't saved, so that's no problem. I can always go back in and create it. So if you take something, you know, with recent movies being what they are, you can go to the Batman logo and you can see this symbol. Many of us are very familiar with it, even if we don't follow comics. We can think about this symbol as an icon. Okay, so what we have here with this symbol is we have a bat silhouette. We have a yellow halo. And we know that from, if you know anything about the comics or the character, the bat is supposed to inspire fear, as it does in most people, and the yellow halo is supposed to reference avenging angel, or that sort of concept. Now, over time, this bat emblem has changed drastically to the point where often they don't even have the halo around it, and when it was first used, there was no halo around it. So this symbol, though, originated from this. This is the image that inspired it. And if you look, they're very different. So how did we get from here to here? How did this go to this? And a lot of it has to do with this idea of fear. And you could do some research too, and you could look into, I think it's Bob Kane and Bruce Finger, I think, are the two creators of Batman. And you can see some of the things they said about the bat symbol and how it's iconic. You can go in and do some research about how these people who create these symbols, where their thoughts had come from for making this association. But really your paper is analyzing how we get from this to this and all the meanings tied to this transition. I know that's a bit complex, so you know, I understand if if you might be a little confused because this isn't something that's real easy to think about in a simplistic way. You know, a good example, I think, of this is how individuals can also become a sort of icon. I mentioned Andre the Giant here and Obama. If you think back to the campaign, his first campaign, we had that Obama poster with hope. Right? You remember that poster, most people do, and how that poster became synonymous with him, and also became something that people began to mock, as you can see in some of these others images. Pope, you know, imagine, yeah. And this is a standard artist who did, but what he was doing was he was transforming these characters. By doing this artwork, he's transforming these individuals into icons, trying to make them less, you see here, less of a person and more of an image. Um, and they did that. They did that extremely well, even with Obama's name. Even if you disagree with his policies, you can really see how they transformed him right down to that symbol. I mean, you look at the symbol there with the O and the flag, they turned that symbol is pretty powerful. That would be something you could actually look at. Obama, oh, yeah, there it is. The Obama O logo. So when you look at that, you can think about how does this represent certain ideas that Obama's campaign and Obama's followers believed, you know. And again, I know a lot of people in this area didn't support his policies and still don't like him, but what we're talking about here is the branding and what it's intended to represent and what it did come to represent for many people. And one of the things that they did quite well was that branding. You could also look at the contemporary campaign, uh, presidential campaign, the presidential campaign of 2016, and look at something like Ted Cruz's branding, uh, where he uses trust Ted. Where is it? Ted Cruz, trust Ted. I know I've seen it behind him in a few things, but I'm not seeing it here. It's not showing it. But it's interesting because if you do watch him speak, he'll have the trust Ted with the two T's combined uh, on the background. There it is right there. And it's funny to me, this logo, Trust Ted with the period, because what it's taking a page from is this TED, ideas worth spreading, technology, education, development, that these conferences that people have, this organization has related to education and innovation, and using that sort of reference. So symbols are very much a part of how we communicate in our contemporary culture, right down to things like emoticons. If you recall, with Facebook, they just introduced a whole new set of emojis for expressing emotions instead of just the like button, and that would be something you could actually talk about as well in this. There's lots and lots of options. So with the essay, one of the things that you need to do is, when you think about this symbol, the first thing you need to do is find out exactly some information on exactly what the symbol means. So like if I wanted to do a paper on the bat emblem, and I'm kind of at a advantage here because I read a lot of comics, so this actually is going to be a bit easier for me. But the first thing I would do is I would go to the McNeese library website, and I would look up some databases. And I would find something like Academic Search Complete, and I would log in. Which I'm not sure that'll work for me. Let me see, how do I get my pen? I know some of you have already gone through this process. So we need to go back here. Library main page. Hmm. Yeah, see, it's not going to let me remember my pen, and some of you may be struggling with that as well. Uh, but you can go in, actually, the first thing I would go to is these database articles and see if you can get your pen if you don't already have it and access them. Now, most of these database articles are set up the same. So let me go to my other institution's website and access their academic search complete. And you notice it's set up pretty much the same way. Once you get to Academic Search Complete, you select full text, and you can select scholarly if you like. I like to also select article just to be sure that I'm getting something worthwhile, and then I'll type in, you know, Batman logo and see what we get. Alright, Batman emblem. See if we get anything. Symbol. Notice that my initial searches aren't bringing anything back, so I have to go in and look more. See, none of these really work for me. Let's try this. And you have to go through and sort of and just research what's there, see what you can find that might be useful. Some of this will be, some of this will not. And I think we're actually doing too much here, so let's take out scholarly. And let's see what we get if we just do this with an emblem. See, we're still not getting it. There we go. And none of this really looks all that useful either. So what you might find actually is as you are researching, you might find that you don't find something useful. I'm going to keep trying because I don't like to really give up about this. That symbol. Let's see what this does. History. So there might be some other things in here that are useful. But you know, the other thing to think about is for this essay, you do have to have three scholarly sources, three secondary scholarly sources, and one must be from an academic journal. But I don't necessarily say that academic journal has to be from a database. You might actually find one online outside of a database. So let's see if we can find something like that. And I'm going to apply that crap test: currency, reliability, authorship, point of view. So this is an evolution of the bat symbol, and it gives you the history of it, right? And how it evolves, how it changes. There's lots of information on that, and people integrate that often into art. So we're not really getting anything here. Let's see, meaning of the Batman logo. See, answers.com isn't really a good site. Let's see what we get here. So this is a blog. We have an actual author, right? We have Ethan Gach. Let's see if we can find out what we can find out about Mr. Gach. He's written a number of articles here, so we know he writes a lot on culture. But we're not really seeing much about him as a person. And this is all part of that research process. Let's see here. You have to go in and make sure that the people you find out about, there should be more about him than this. All we're getting is links to his articles. That's worrisome because the first thing we found that's useful, we have his articles, but we don't have a lot of his bio here. So let's do a search on him. And this is why I tell my 101 students that this is actually, research is very time consuming. Let's see if this is finally him. So that domain has been suspended. Let's see if this is the same person. Yep, full bio. So it looks like he reports on geek culture. So we can say that he has a bit of authority here. We do know he's published quite a lot. So let's quote him, and I would go through and I would read this and see what he has to say about the evolution in the symbol and take notes. I would also start looking, I wouldn't stop there, I'd start looking at other articles as well. So there's some information on heraldry here. Now, notice that I could go to a Wikipedia. I wouldn't quote the Wikipedia. I would go to the references and I'd see what I could find in the references. And a lot of these things I can't use because they're in other languages, so that's not really going to help me too much. So actually that search isn't very helpful. Evolution of the bat logo, flowing data. We can add this, we can look up information of the evolution of symbols. So this would be an interesting article. Someone won't let me actually access it, but you might be able to access it. Well, I'm not going to have you sit here and have me look at me searching all this information. The idea here is that uh, you're going to have to go into a lot of different sites to get information to write on something like this, and that you might not have an easy time finding immediate research. You're going to have to think out of the box and really look at maybe some books, go by the library, and really talk with some librarians about maybe helping you find some materials if you can. You know, if you have a local public library, if you're a off-site student, that might be a good choice to look at. Going there and talking to a librarian about getting some help with this paper, because the department does require that you have 3 secondary scholarly sources and 2 primary sources for this. One of those primary sources would be an image of the icon, which if you need to look up how to cite images in APA, because remember this paper is in APA, the first version of it, there's a way to cite images. Let's see here. In the 4th edition of a writer's resource, it's on page 358, but it's in section 7, and I believe it's the same section in the 5th edition. It'll explain how to cite it for you. So it gives you the in-text, the works cited citation, and also it talks about how to do it in text from a website, how to do that. So be sure you look at that as well. So yeah, you're going to want to go in and do some research, and you're going to want to, one, find out what the symbol's denotative meaning is. So what does it literally mean? Find out what the symbol's connotative meaning is. What associative meanings does it evoke? How has the symbol changed meaning over time? Does the symbol have different meanings to different audiences? And ultimately, what is the usefulness of all of this knowledge about the evolution of this symbol? So those are the key questions you need to be asking as you are working on this paper. I hope this little video, I know it's kind of a meandering lecture video, but I have a lot of thoughts about it, and I just want you to know over time, don't give up on your research. Just keep trying, because this is a shorter video, and it's an online video. I can't show you my whole process for researching. My researching for me takes weeks, sometimes months. You don't have that amount of time, but do devote some time to it, and don't give up right away if you can't find information right away. And be sure to discuss some of the struggles you're having with research on the discussion forum. But at least these 5 questions will hopefully help you focus in on the main content you need to have in this essay.